Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you to our side event on organic soils and peatlands in the Baltic countries. I warmly welcome you here physically in the Peatland Pavilion at the COP26 in Glasgow, but also all of you out there online which are joining us via our virtual Peatland Pavilion. I'm very glad to welcome you today to the side event, which we are organizing in the name of the Latvian State Forest Research Institute Silava and the Michael Succow Foundation, which is one of the partners of the Greifswald Mires Center. My name is Jan Peters. I'm the managing director of the Michael Succow Foundation and also involved as a senior scientist in the projects in the Baltic countries. Today, we want to shed some light on Baltic peatlands, as Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are very rich in these ecosystems, and we will learn more about their distribution, their status, their land use, the challenges, and also, of course, their importance for the climate, for climate action and adaptation. We are very glad that we have speakers from all three Baltic countries here, from the party delegations of the Baltic countries, and we are very excited to hear your insights into this topic throughout this event. The event is organized in the frame of two projects which are running in the Baltics regarding peatlands. One is the EUKI project supported by the German Environmental Ministry called Capturing Carbon by Baltic Peatland Farmers, which just started. And the second one is an EU-funded live climate project called OrgBalt, dealing with nutrient-rich organic soils in the Baltics. But we will hear more about this later. And first, I would like to hand over to Jeva Lisite from Silava, who is the project coordinator of the live OrgBalt project. Please, Jeva.
Thank you, Jan, for this nice introduction. Good afternoon from Latvia. I'm indeed grateful for this possibility to discuss organic soil topic and peatlands in the framework of COP26 conference and with wide community. And I'm also very grateful for this possibility to participate remotely today. And it turns out it even possible to be a co-host of the event by remote participation, which is excellent, of course, in a given circumstances and situation. But today, as Jan already introduced, we are going to discuss quite a lot about the Baltic states' perspective, about how we do see our peatlands and organic soils, how we do manage them, and what is our current and planned intentions for the future. Anyhow, organic soils are beyond important in our climate change mitigation agendas in Baltic states and also in Nordic part of the Europe, of course, where you can find peatlands and organic soils. And the numbers are talking by themselves. There are countries for whom greenhouse gas emissions from organic soil management constitute about 70% of countries' total emissions. So it's indeed beyond important to think about, to consider data possibilities, to consider data mining, and to also consider possibilities for policy planning. I wish us very fruitful discussion for today, and also I would love to wish us success in implementation of our knowledge into policy documents. It's always important to have a knowledge, but it's even more important to have knowledge implemented into real life conditions. And by this, I would like to give floor back to Jan, and we could start indeed our discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeva, for giving these introductory words from your side. Before I forget about that, we of course want to have an interactive session here. So after the speakers, we will have a Q&A session with our speakers physically here in the pavilion. So you are invited to ask your questions afterwards live here, but also you outside online in the internet, you can use the Q&A button on the platform to ask your questions live. I will get them here on my screen and can ask them to our respective speakers. Then I would like to move on and give the word to our first speaker, which is Elina Baltroka from the Ministry of Environmental Protection in Latvia. She is the head of the Climate Change and Adaptation Policy Unit in the ministry, and will give us some insights on the peatlands in Latvia. Please, Elina.
Thank you, Jan. I hope you can hear me. It's a pleasure to be here and join this discussion today. My name is Elina Baltroka, and I'm the head of Adaptation and Climate Change Mitigation Unit of the Environment Ministry of Latvia. So let me start by yes, perfect. Let me start by just outlining that Latvia, as Jan already said, is very rich in organic soils. 15% of our territory is covered in organic soils. And organic soils can be found in areas of forest, wetlands, grasslands, croplands. If we look from the perspective of the greenhouse gas inventory categories. And from all agricultural soils, organic soils constitute around 6%. And of course, organic soils is also a large source of greenhouse gas emissions. And in Latvia, greenhouse gas emissions from organic soils are about 8.6 million tons of CO2 equivalent. From the policies perspective, let me underline that Latvia is fully committed to climate neutrality. We adopted our climate neutrality strategy in 2020, and we would like to reach climate neutrality by 2050. And we have this climate neutrality strategy, which is a long-term vision document, basically outlining Latvia's vision and providing a framework for setting a common direction of development of all economic sectors. And for this discussion, probably key areas that have been identified in the strategy are sustainable land use and agriculture, as well as CO2 sequestration. Now I'm back. Oh, sorry. So now let me turn to greenhouse gas emissions and removals in Latvia. Since 1990, our greenhouse gas emissions, excluding land use change, and forestry, have decreased by 57%. But if we look at emissions and CO2 removals in the land use change, and forestry sector, we can see that removals are declining, especially in the last couple of years. And this is a challenge we indeed need to address. So in order to address these challenges, we of course see that organic soils are nationally important. And for us, it is also important to think about how we manage organic soils to also be able to achieve the targets we have set to ourselves. And in order to do that, we have supported different research initiatives to better enhance our understanding of organic soils, especially when it comes to greenhouse gas inventory and projections, because only with better understanding of the sector, it is possible to plan for the future. And some examples of initiatives of support to research include several greenhouse gas inventory and projections improvement targeted projects, as well as national grants related to modeling and optimization of greenhouse gas mitigation scenarios in light of climate neutrality objective that we have undertaken. And finally, in order to better respond to the need of increased climate action, our ministry, together with the Ministry of Agriculture, have been tasked by our government, by the Cabinet of Ministers, to produce a report by 2023 that will include the future on the land use change, and forestry sector. That needs to be a vision needs to be developed and a concrete plan needs to be developed for this sector to achieve and plan measures that will be taken up to ensure that we are compatible with the long-term objective of climate neutrality by 2050, as well as shorter-term 2030 targets that Latvia will have to undertake as a member state of the European Union. So with this, I'd like to conclude. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Elina, for these insights into the situation in Latvia. And next, I would like to ask Kristi Klaas, Undersecretary for Climate Affairs in the Estonian Ministry of Environment, to shed some light on the situation in Estonia. Please.
Hello, good afternoon. I hope you can hear me. You feel like you're talking on your own and you don't have any sense of other people hearing you. First of all, I'm very grateful for this event. Although I'm responsible for climate change at the ministry, we all agree that climate change and biodiversity are very much combined nowadays. And it's not very well known what kind of effects one or the other has on the areas. So, and we just recently actually had a very good international conference in Tallinn, where specifically climate and biodiversity were looked together. So very glad that I can be here today. So I understand I have about 10 minutes, so I'll try to be very concise. Today, of course, everyone knows the importance of peatlands in ensuring clean water supplies and biodiversity. But in the context of climate change, I would say that the role of Mires as carbon sinks is not so well known. However, alongside other ecosystem services, peatlands also offer climate regulation services through carbon sequestration. In their natural state, undrained bogs are the most important carbon sinks among terrestrial ecosystems. They capture carbon for millennia, if not drained in the meantime. So they play a very, very important role. And peatlands of the boreal region, that is Scandinavia and the Baltic countries, are the biggest carbon sink of Europe. Still, the huge amount of carbon that the Mires have stored for millennia is released when peatlands are drained. So the carbon captured in peat is decomposed and emitted into the atmosphere as greenhouse gases, thus contributing to climate change. Due to natural conditions, Estonia's territory is quite wet. From one side, peatlands have covered a quarter of our country. Today, 2/3 of our peatlands are drained, and several areas have completely mineralized. Nowadays, less than 10% of our territory is covered by peatlands, and the main part of these being high moors or raised bogs, and 1/3 are fens. And we have 11 wetlands that are of international importance, or Ramsar areas, where mainly peat bogs are protected. Here is a map of Estonian peatlands, and here you can see that with brown color are raised bogs, and the green color marks fens. So quite a lot around the country. Peatlands are of very high ecological value. We have several species whose only possible habitats are peatlands. And many of those are abundant, but several are very rare. Here, for example, Estonian Mires are the habitats for several Europe's highly threatened and thus nature-directed plant species. And these include also Estonian endemic species which do not grow anywhere else in the world but Estonia. As the Mires are the oldest natural communities in the territory of Estonia, species that are unique to our biota have been able to develop here. Here are marked 11 endangered species, habitat species in Europe, which can be found in Estonian peatlands. Those who are very into biodiversity maybe understand more the codes on the slides. However, recent reports show that some of the species are not in favorable conditions, so that there's a challenge for our nature protection colleagues. The National Biodiversity Strategy prepared for the improvement of the condition of natural habitats and species. Among other things, they have a goal to improve the water regime of peatlands of at least 10,000 hectares, as well as conversion of at least 1,000 hectares of formerly abandoned peat extraction areas into wetlands. And this is a very important contributor to climate policy. Some numbers also on the extent of peat extraction in Estonia today. We have currently 128 production areas in the country, and the extraction permits are valid until 2050. Yes, so maybe I will not say all of which is marked on the slide, as I'm a little bit running out of time already. However, I would like to point out the LULUCF sector, which is within the EU climate policy framework. The emissions are mainly affected, beside other sectors, the emissions from drained peatlands, and also emissions from extraction and horticultural peat. Cultivation of peat soils accounts for almost 40% of agricultural GHG emissions, and the transfer of cultivated peat soils into permanent grassland, restoration of wetlands, or afforestation, they reduce GHG emissions. And also restoration of abandoned peat protection areas can significantly reduce GHG emissions. And in the light of climate objectives, the management of these areas is fast and cost-effective activity. As peatlands have also been historically used in different ways, and there is a large number of damaged areas, it is necessary to set priorities. And here are pointed out 4 of the criteria which are the basis of the selection of areas to be restored. So the international importance comes first, and the potential of restoration the second, and so on. Here is also a map of priority restoration areas where the green color marks all Mires, and where the damaged plant cover still exists. But restoration of water regime is necessary. Sorry, it might be confusing. Green areas are the priority restoration areas which are Mires. With red color, there are areas where damaged plant cover still exists, but restoration of water regime is necessary. And with blue color, there are abandoned peat production areas. A few words about financing. We have mainly used EU's cohesion fund for nature conservation to restore the Mires. And besides that, also the LIFE projects have been very important. So 3 of them will will be finalized, are finalized or will be finalized this year. And the last one, financed through EU Horizon program, is about to start. And to conclude about the current situation in Estonia, more than half of natural peatlands is preserved and well protected in Estonia. And we have met and even exceeded our recovery targets that we have set for 2020. And we have already restored the natural water regime of more than 15,000 hectares of peatlands, and also restored at least 10,000 hectares, and will restore also more than 10,000 hectares. And what I can also say, that there is a great interest with what can it be spotted by the private sector already to contribute into financing of restoration of those areas. Thank you very much from my side.
Thank you very much, Kristi. I think that was a very good insight, not only on the climate change part, but also on the biodiversity side, which shows that peatlands are nature-based solutions, not only for climate, but also biodiversity, water, and other environmental objectives. So thanks a lot. And I also really like that you mentioned this new Horizon 2020 Green Deal project. It's called Waterlands. And I also see some of the other participants of this project here in the room, because this is a very large consortium consisting of, I think, over 30 partners from 14 different European countries. And I'm especially glad that Estonia will play a very big role in restoring one of the big drained peatland sites in your country. Thanks a lot. And I'm very pleased to now invite Kristina Simonaityė. She is the advisor to the minister in the Ministry for Agriculture of Lithuania. So I'm very pleased that you will also give us some insights why peatlands are also important to look at from the agricultural side, what agricultural land use has to do with peatlands and climate change, and what Lithuania is doing in this regard. So please, the floor is yours.
So thank you, Jan, for the introduction and for the invitation to this event. And I just want to echo what our fellow speakers has said already, that how important it is that we here at the COP are already talking about nature-based solutions as part of mitigating and adaptation to climate change. So I just think it's really neat that we are moving forward, merging these two areas. And I was asked here to talk about Lithuania and Lithuania's case regarding peatlands. I don't have slides, but I hope that's okay. Just my story, will still interest you. To give you some context, as our colleagues have already mentioned, Lithuania is a neighboring country, so the situation is quite similar. It's also rich in peatlands. About 10% of the country's area is classified as peatland. A lot of it is degraded, about 70%. Due to drainage mostly in the second half of the 20th century. About 10% of that, about a third of that degraded area is actually now under agricultural use. So this drainage, and more importantly, the plowing of the peatlands has been a major problem for both biodiversity, the water quality, and of course climate change. So degraded peatlands is a major source of greenhouse gas emissions in the Lithuanian emission profile. So it's definitely an area that we have to deal and address with. And so as we are embarking on the UN decade on ecosystem restoration and dealing with the ever more pressing issues of climate crisis, restoration of peatlands has come to the forefront as an obvious and very important natural climate solutions. And I think that the urgency of the matter is such that we can't really talk anymore about small scale projects. We really need to scale up our restoration activities and move towards a bigger bigger areas and bigger ambition. And that's what we are really attempting to do in Lithuania with our new investment from the EU Recovery and Resilience Facility. And so specifically financing the greenhouse gas emissions mitigation through revetting of degraded peatlands in agricultural lands. And as far as I know, we are the only country that actually set up this proposal through the RRF for the peatland restoration, and I think that's quite exciting and interesting as well. Yes, so as we are working on developing this investment for the last half a year or more, we have been facing certain challenges, mostly regarding the fact that it's really the first time that we are embarking on such a large scale restoration, which really compared to what Estonia just presented is not that big, because we are talking only about 8,000 hectares in 5 years. But in comparison to what we've achieved before, it's really a significant step up. So we are treating it as a sort of pilot project, and there's still a lot of things to learn. But given how the RRF funding operates, that we do need to achieve our targets to receive the funding. We do hope, that this effort will be successful and we will achieve our goals. So as I mentioned, the scaling up is one of the challenges, but another issue that we are foreseeing is really attracting the farmers and the landowners to participate in this measure. So it is key to, when talking about this, demonstrate to them not only the environmental benefits that the peatland restoration will deliver, but also the financial ones, for them, including in the long run. So will they be able to receive support, including the direct payments for these revetted areas? What types of activities will they be able to carry out in these areas? We probably will be talking about Paludiculture more. So will that be possible or not? Also, how do we ensure that in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time, these areas will not be again drained and plowed? So these are the questions that we are trying to address right now before the launch of the measure next year. And we are also collaborating with environmental NGOs in the specific area to encourage the farmers and landowners to participate and raise their awareness on the issue at hand. However, all that said, the farming community in Lithuania has not met this initiative and this investment very favorably. I will not go into much detail why was that, but let me just say that they would have appreciated more the investments in climate smart technology, which we've heard quite a lot here in the COP as well. But as probably most of you here would agree, really to deal with climate change, we do need both the technological and natural solutions. So when we are talking back in Lithuania about this investment, we are really trying hard to highlight these linkages with climate, and especially the net zero target in agriculture sector, meaning that these restoration projects could offset or balance some of the other agricultural emissions that might not be possible, that might not be avoidable. Moreover, recently we've been hearing more and more from farmers and their representatives about carbon farming. So is the area that they are really interested in, and I think that the interest will grow even more with the launch of the EU carbon farming initiative. I think it's going to be next month. So what we really need to do here, in communicating, is really try to match those concepts and show to the farmers and their representatives that when we are talking about wetland restoration or peatland restoration, we are talking about carbon farming. So these are not mutually exclusive concepts, and it is important to realize that as well. And finally, I was talking to someone here on Saturday from the Scottish side about their Scottish peatland restoration drive. And what they mentioned as a challenge was actually having enough people, enough restoration specialists to do a scaled up restoration activities. That's something that we have not necessarily thought about in Lithuania, but I'm thinking that as the need for the restoration grows, the restoration expertise will also grow in demand. Yeah, and so to conclude, we are still at the very start of this endeavor, and as I said, we still need a lot to learn from fellow countries as well. And I think Estonia, what they presented, is a good example in a scaling up of restoration. The ultimate goal of this particular investment from the RRF is climate action, but as was mentioned before, the values are multiple, both biodiversity and water and our own well-being in general. But really at the forefront, at the center of this measure are the farmers and other landowners. And so it's really important to give them this, or encourage this ownership of theirs in managing the recovery of their land. So the role of us as government officials is to encourage that and support that, including financially. So I will stop here. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you a lot, Christina, for these very, very important perspective from the agricultural side. And I think it was really, really useful also for later discussion to make this link also between the RRF measure you're planning, the Common Agriculture Policy, which is at the moment on renewal, where new measures has to be designed, but also the upcoming carbon farming initiative, which is one of the key points for agriculture in the EU Green Deal. So connecting all these different policy areas, and also what Kristi presented, the Habitat Directive, the Natura 2000 network, to merge that all together, is really a challenge we have with peatlands, as they are such a multi-talent as nature-based solutions, but they also face multiple challenges which we have to address. And the science definitely helps us to address these challenges better. So I would like to ask now my colleague and co-host of the session, Jeva, which you already met in the beginning, to present a little bit of preliminary results from the Live Climate OrgBalt project, which is running also in all three Baltic states with partners in Finland and Germany. But Jeva, the floor is yours to present the project and show us what you find out more from the scientific point of view. Thank you. And don't forget to ask questions in the Q&A, especially if you are joining online. Thank you. Jeva.
Thank you, Jan. Indeed, about a little bit about science, about what we have found in Live OrgBalt project, and about our preliminary results. These are indeed preliminary ones because we are right in the middle of the project run. 2 years have passed, but we have 2 years in front of us. So we have some results, but these are indeed preliminary ones. The full name of the project is Demonstration of Climate Change Mitigation Potential of Nutrient-Rich Organic Soils in Baltic States and Finland. And as Jan already mentioned, we are from 5 countries, from 3 Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and from Finland and Germany. And we are 8 partners, mainly scientific institutions, but also NGOs are among us, including Michael Succow Foundation from Germany is one of our partners, and also Ministry of Agriculture of Latvia is one of our partners working in the project, actively involved. And Ministry is also collaborating with ministries in partner countries, especially in Baltic states. So we can indeed await for implementation of our project results, indeed in real life policy documents. About main idea of the project, it's improvement of organic soil management for contribution to climate change mitigation. And we are looking from a perspective that on one side, we can set aside the organic soils and leave them for protection, but on the other side, these areas are currently managed, and we could develop management which is with climate change mitigation potential and cost-effective one. And that is how we are looking on this issue and how we are dealing with it. And why it's important, why organic soils are important, we already heard today, but just to mention some facts, organic soils can be found in 7% of EU area. And if you are looking particularly in the sector of agriculture, around 3% of EU agricultural land is on organic soils, but greenhouse gas emissions from these areas from organic soil management in agriculture is about 25% of total agricultural greenhouse gas emissions. So quite a small area gives indeed a big proportion of greenhouse gas emissions. That's why we should consider how to better manage these areas and what would be the best solutions for it. And particularly OrgBalt focuses on the most common group of organic soils, on nutrient-rich drained organic soil group, which is around, which can be found in around 61% of total organic soils in EU countries. Another part is nutrient-poor organic soils, according to IPCC classification. That was why, but now about how to. And the scope of our project is, as I already said, nutrient-rich drained organic soils. And we are considering, we are looking what can be done in forest and agricultural land management. And we have three main targets. First one is to make greenhouse gas inventory improvements by inclusion better data, better activity data, and better project territory-specific greenhouse gas emission factors. I will describe later on a bit in details. Second of our targets is demonstration of greenhouse gas mitigation measures. We are currently implementing greenhouse gas mitigation measures in our project demonstration territories. We are going to organize excursions for everyone who would like to see how could organic soils be managed in a climate smart way in Latvia and also in our partner countries. And the third one is policy uptake, tools for analysis and projections of climate change mitigation impacts. And also we are, of course, preparing proposals for implementation in policy documents. And what is our main goal is to serve policymakers with better data and with better knowledge how to manage organic soils in climate smart way. That would be summarizing our targets, but going step by step, how we are going to implement them in real practice about the greenhouse gas inventory improvements. It's one of our targets, as I said, and to achieve this target, we are currently performing measurements in 17 demonstration sites and 34 reference sites in Baltic states, in all three Baltic states, and also in Finland, to calculate project territory-specific greenhouse gas emission factors. You can use, of course, emission factors from IPCC guidelines, default ones, but if you have national data, it's, and we are encouraged, in fact, also by IPCC to use nationally specific data and nationally specific greenhouse gas emission factors. That's what we are working for within OrgBalt as well. And we are currently doing greenhouse gas measurements. We are measuring CO2 and NO and methane emissions, and also multiple spectrum of environmental data. And measurements are being done for 24 months. 1 year is already passed, and we are going to measure for another year to get real good data for calculation of regionally specific climate sensitive greenhouse gas emission factors attributed to different organic soil management strategies for inclusion in national greenhouse gas inventories and for better data projections as well, of course. How it looks in practice, these are our demo sites, pictures from our demonstration sites and reference sites. We have 10 reference sites in Estonia, 8 in Finland, and demonstration and reference sites, and 29 demonstration and reference sites in Latvia, and also in Lithuania we have 10 reference sites. As you can see, we are making as well as greenhouse gas measurements and also litter decomposition experiments and soil root ingrowth and soil and water analysis are performed. So multiple spectrum of measurements are currently going on just to acquire better and regionally and nationally specific data. But not everything can be measured, and what we cannot measure, we can model. And that's another activity for improvements in greenhouse gas inventories. We are developing modeling tools and instruments. There are several we are working on. Currently, we are developing the Succow Peatland simulator. This is a model developed in our partners in Luke Institute in Finland. But currently we are working to adapt this simulator for project needs and also to adapt it for Baltic states data inputs. It is a modeling tool for water table estimation and for projections of greenhouse gas emission levels in organic soils by comparing different management options. Mainly used in forest land, and we are right now working on how to implement in a real practice. Another one we have been working, which is already as a result, it's depth to water maps for Baltic states. You can find them in web. Here you can see a link to the maps, and maps are developed for better data distribution acquirement about organic soil distribution. Mainly, these are special info of wet soil and seasonal stream distribution. By putting these maps together with another data and by applying modeling tools, we can acquire better data about organic soil distribution, again, also for inclusion in national greenhouse gas inventories. What we already know from previous results and how could it look when we are implementing OrgBalt results in national greenhouse gas inventories. We have had another live project, Life Restore, which ended when Life OrgBalt started about the time. And from Life Restore, we have data about nutrient poor organic soils in Latvia. This was a national project to compare with OrgBalt, which is an international one. But in Life Restore, we got data about, again, about CO2, methane, and NTO emissions. And we calculated greenhouse gas emission factors. And already also greenhouse gas emission factors are implemented in national greenhouse gas inventory starting from this year submission. And here below, you can see results. And by recalculation in submission 2021, it's with orange dots, with orange bars, you can see how emission amounts have changed. But if we see above in this slide, you can see that for CO2 emissions, emission factors calculated within Life Restore project were about twice as less to compare with IPCC default ones. But for example, for methane, there was opposite situation. So you can just receive by national measurements, nationally specific data, not obligatory. These emissions will be smaller or bigger. It's cannot be predicted, but at the end you are receiving just more precise data for inclusion in your inventories. That is what we are indeed striving for in this project. Another of our activities, as I already told, is demonstration of greenhouse gas mitigation measures. And we are establishing, currently implementing climate change mitigation measures in 10 demonstration sites in forest land and in 7 sites in agricultural land. And the main outcome of this action would be knowledge on how to implement climate change mitigation measures and what are awaited effects. As we are also doing measurements there, we can see, we can demonstrate how to implement measures, what actions should be done, and what is awaited effects in one or another way. And towards the end of the project, we are also going to prepare a catalog of climate change mitigation measures, where there will be greenhouse gas mitigation potential, as well as socioeconomic impact evaluation, and also instructions for application of these measures outside of project territory. But that's more towards the end of the project. You could be interested on a variety of climate change mitigation measures we are implementing. And here I'm going to mention not all of them, but maybe the most interesting ones. In forest land, we are implementing paludicultures with black alder and birch, also agroforestry practices. Afforestation, of course, is one of our measures, continuation of forest cover, strip harvesting, regeneration of felling sites without reconstruction of drainage systems, and also wood ash application, which could be a perspective one. And in agricultural land, there is conversion of cropland to grassland, controlled drainage of grassland, legumes in farm crop rotation. It's controversial a bit, but we included it to see what will be, what measurements will tell us about greenhouse gas mitigation potential of this measure. and also fast-growing species in riparian buffer zones. That's briefly about measures we are demonstrating. About policy uptake, one of our indeed main targets towards the end of the project, we would do everything what's possible to include our policy results into our research results into policy documents. And for supporting this, we are developing several tools for policymakers to ease their life and to show how could simulation models could be run to see what would be policy outcomes if we are implementing one or another a bunch of climate change mitigation measures. And there will be a tool, country level run tool called simulation tool, where policymakers could play a bit and see what outcomes can be achieved with one or another measure to be implemented. And also this tool will help us with projections. If we have to strive towards climate neutrality, we should also be able to calculate outcomes of our measures, of course, implemented. And also one of our main goals is to ensure possibility to make quantitative assessments of different climate change mitigation measures outcomes in organic soil management. Currently, mostly countries are calculating, not calculating, but assessing this effect in qualitative manner, just by describing and sort of educating guessing. But if we have very precise measurements, we can indeed give also quantitative assessment in data and just better serve policymakers. Currently, we have already one simulation tool almost ready. It's farm level tool for modeling outcome at farm level, and also its tool is used for data gathering for this bigger tool, simulation tool for implementation in country level. That's about our, I would like to say, the most important target and outcome of the project about policy uptake. That's more or less it about the project in very briefly running through it. Thank you. And for more information, of course, you are welcome to our homepage where much more information is available. And I'm open, of course, for coming discussion on this topic today and afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Yeva, for giving us this insights into the live OrgBalt project. It's really a pity that you cannot be here with us due to the COVID situation in Latvia at the moment, but I hope that we will meet at the next COP when you maybe present your final conclusions, final results from the project. Next, I will switch my role. I will jump out of my moderation role and will switch to the presenter's role, as I also would like to give you some ideas of how paludiculture, how sustainable use of peatlands can happen in the Baltic countries. That's what we are working on for the last years, and we will continue to work on that from the Michael Succow Foundation, one of the partners in the Greifswald Mires Center, but of course also very closely with our focal points and partners in the Baltic countries, which is the Estonian Fund for Nature, ELF in Estonia, the Lake and Peatland Research Center in Latvia, and the Lithuanian Fund for Nature, LFN, and the Lithuanian Peatland Foundation, with whom we are working and without whom we would not be possible to make our results. So I would like to present you a little bit about challenges and solutions for upscaling peatland rewetting and peatland carbon farming in the Baltic countries. First of all, I would like to give you also a little bit the European perspective. As we have already heard, the three Baltic countries host huge areas of peatlands. Although they are relatively small in size, they have 25,000 square kilometers of peatland area, but around 70% of them are drained and degraded, used for agriculture, forestry, or peat extraction. And you can see here on the picture that the degradation with this around 70%, it's still better than in Central Europe or in Ireland in the UK, but there are large challenges we have to face, especially when it comes to climate change, as we calculated that the 3 Baltic countries, they are all in the top 10 of greenhouse gas emitters from peat soils in the EU. Latvia is on the position number 5, Estonia on the 8th, and Lithuania on the 9th position. And this is mainly from the fact that although the area is relatively small, also the percentage of peatland soils used for agriculture, for example, is relatively small, around 6-7% in the countries. The share of the emissions from the peatlands due to the drainage is huge, like in Latvia up to 70%, and this only includes the percentage of emissions in the agricultural sector and the agricultural land use sector. So not even touching upon forestry or peat mining. So the challenges are huge, and especially in the Baltic countries, we have to find solutions. One of the solutions is paludiculture. It was already mentioned in the other presentations of the speakers. But what is paludiculture? Paludiculture is the cultivation of biomass on wet and re-wetted peatlands with plant species that contribute to the conservation of the peat deposits and ideally to the formation of new peat. It stops the CO2 emissions. It keeps the peatlands productive, so farmers can still use it and harvest commodities from these sites. And it gives also perspective for future bioeconomy. And there are different examples, different crops on which we can look at. It's reed, it's peat moss, black elder, which already was mentioned before by Yeva. It's cattail, but also cranberries for fruits or water buffaloes for the meat. So there are different opportunities. And the challenge of paludiculture is, of course, that it requires a complete transformation of the agricultural use of peatland sites, because it's a completely new management approach. So far, coming from 1,000 years of our cultural history in Europe, but also elsewhere, we adapt the sites to the utilization by drainage to make them to make them suitable, for example, for grasslands, for croplands. But now paludiculture has the approach to use site management techniques, opportunities to work on wet and soft conditions in the peatlands so that we don't have to drain them, so that we keep the carbon in and still use it with adapted machinery, as you can use it and see it here. But of course, this requires also new products and markets, so it doesn't stop at the farm gate, but you also need production, you also need value chains. And for this, we in the Greifswald Mires Center, together with a lot of partners, we work on new value chains for circular bioeconomy. So here you can see some examples: construction materials, insulation materials. We have packaging for delivery services, but also bioenergy purposes. So there is a wide range of products which could be used and which is under development. But it's also important to know where to make the paludiculture, where to start farming on the peatlands, because we have heard from Kristi mostly that many of the peatlands, especially in the Baltics, are actually protected areas, national parks, EU protected sites in the Natura 2000 network. So we should, of course, avoid future conflicts between usage of re-wetted peatlands in paludiculture and nature conservation, biodiversity objectives. And for this, we performed together with our partners in the Baltics a pan-Baltic paludiculture assessment, which you can see here on the map. We used 4 different classes. The green class is for all sites which are which have no protection status, which are under intense agriculture at the moment, which can easily shifted or changed to near-term paludiculture implementation. So these are the green spots, and you can see here below on the numbers that it's almost more than 450,000 hectares of peatlands, which is directly suitable without any limitations. Then we have the category with minor restriction, where the management or the status can be changed, but it might exclude some options. For example, change grassland, which sedges and other species, into cropping paludiculture with, for example, cattail or reeds, as there's special restricted management due to protected areas needed. Then we have the orange class, which has medium restrictions, so the management has stronger limits on the options which you can choose there, and you need more major efforts to achieve permission for paludiculture. For example, also in forestry, where you have different legislation and you cannot easily change the water level on the forested side. And then, of course, we have the red sites with major restrictions. So these are mostly the nature conservation areas, core zones of national parks, strictly protected areas with no management and without prohibition of economic activities. And you see very nicely here on the map that you see easily the red spots, because these are the big national parks, the big protected areas, which fortunately and very proudly still exist in the Baltic countries. But we also see a lot of green spots, which make up almost the same sites than the protected areas. So there is a huge prospectus for paludiculture in the future in the Baltics. But we have also heard that there are still a lot of open questions how to implement paludiculture on the ground in practice. What do farmers need? What do producers need to use paludiculture biomass, and so on and so forth? All the logistics connected to that. We need to work on these value chains for the paludiculture products, because no farmer will switch for long-term utilization of their lands if they don't have guarantees, for example. And of course, we also need incentives for and remuneration of the paludiculture service. And here especially, Christina already mentioned that, connecting to the carbon farming initiative. So we need carbon farming payments, so that farmers are not only paid for the biomass production, but also for keeping the carbon in the ground and delivering such important environmental services to our society. So what we are doing in our new projects, which we are just started under the European Climate Initiative of the German Federal Ministry for Environment, we want to work a lot on knowledge transfer and training. So also the German government just started under their new peatland strategy large-scale and long-term paludiculture pilot projects in Germany. So we would like to initiate the exchange also to other peatland-rich European countries like the Baltic countries, on study trips, on trainings, on bringing multipliers to the sites. We want to work on the guidance, but also on the monitoring, because a good carbon farming scheme requires very secured and well-proven transparent monitoring schemes, for which we of course also can use the results from the live OrgBalt project. We then need in the policies, we need the remuneration schemes and promotion of ecosystem services. And we want to work on advising and on the governance of such schemes, as this is very important for land users, for land farmers, that there is not added an extra level of bureaucracy in that to make it even more difficult to apply these schemes, but to link it to the existing, for example, common agriculture policy, and make it easily feasible for them to take it up and to change to paludiculture. And you can see here these little leaflets. I also have some with me as paludiculture and the peatland climate change issue is still widely not well known in the Baltic countries, but also elsewhere in the EU. We produce these leaflets in all 3 Baltic languages. We translated and also kind of created new terminology to make it more clear what it is, what we are talking about, and spread the news, spread the information. And with that, we will also continue in the next years together with our partners, and of course, also very closely together with the ministries. So thanks for your attention, and I'm welcome all your questions here and comments here in the room. Thank you. Now I jump back to my role as a moderator. And I would like to open the panel. We still have half an hour, so still enough time to have a vivid discussion here on the ground. And I already received quite a lot of questions here in the Q&A online. So I assume that we have quite a lot of people also joining us via the internet. But first of all, I would like to look around here in the audience if there's anyone of you who would like to ask a question to the panelist. There's one in the back, please.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to the panel. I thought absolutely fascinating. I'm Dave Gorman from University of Edinburgh. It seems to me that the challenge to me seems to be about business models and scaling. So we're still in the situation a bit like with mitigation, where we're, trying to move to renewables while we continue to subsidize fossil fuels. And it seems like there's an element of that here. So I wanted to ask the panel whether we'd agree. It seems to me one of the things we need to start doing is stop extraction, and at the same time make it attractive for farmers, in particular with new business models, to move to some of the exciting things you're talking about. So I just wondered if the panel would agree, but also thoughts about the key question. Well, how do you actually get there then? How do you get towards that scaling? But thank you very much. Fascinating.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Does one of you would like to answer to this question? You can take that microphone there, yes. Kristi, please.
Start off. Absolutely, I completely agree the point that you made, but I believe where it lies is actually that the companies need to understand what kind of opportunities actually there are in order to restore peatlands, and at the current moment, I would say that the knowledge is not that good. However, what we see in Estonia is that there is a growing interest in finding new solutions which help to restore nature and biodiversity and help to reduce the emissions, GHG emissions. So what we feel is that the capacity of the government needs to grow in order to be able to distribute the information, and also to have a broader scale of cooperation with scientists who can provide really the information that the companies need in order to develop new business models. But I completely agree, this is an area where a lot of opportunities lie, and where actually the cooperation also between private sector and public sector could be further enhanced.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kristi. Somebody you want to add, Elina? Yeah, please.
Yes, if I may add, I think also in Latvia's case, I fully agree with Kristi here, but it is a challenge to also convince businesses that this kind of extraction needs to stop in order to be compatible with the climate neutrality targets. So it is also up for the government to kind of assess where the synergies lie, and also assess the risks. Then if we continue emitting in those sectors, then apparently we will need to reduce much more in other sectors. So it is a very challenging question also politically, I would say, at least in Latvia's case. But the sector, of course, is willing to modernize and think about new solutions. But I think also at this stage, I would agree that still also research is much needed, because, for instance, in Latvia's case, I think it is more than 90% of the extracted peat is used for horticulture. So in essence, it is creating also removals in another category of land use within the inventory context. So there's also these synergies that need to be taken into account. So this is a very important question. Thank you.
Yes, just to add on from the farmer's perspective a bit on this, because I agree that on the one hand we are moving towards support for the peatland restoration, but on the other hand we are often still supporting activities that might lead to their drainage, and traditional use. So, but I think that the new cap will help us on that regard as well, because of the new measures to protect the wetlands. So I think that's a good base for us to jump on, since the farmers and landowners, they will not be able to plow that land anymore, then it's maybe a good opportunity for us to turn towards the rewetting of those areas, and then to the new, the paludiculture or other activities on there. And I totally agree with what was said before about the actual still lack of knowledge and to need to increase awareness and encourage really those stakeholders to learn more about I would say the connections, in the climate and biodiversity and the land management. So I think there's still a long way to go, but I think we are on a good track here. Yeah, thank you.
Maybe as you have the microphone, I would like to also ask one a little bit technical question to you, because that was here in the chat. Can you maybe explain shortly what these RRF measures are, what this is, and why you are using that for peatlands? And one additional question for me, how do you think, can you link it up with, for example, the new common agricultural policy schemes you are developing in Lithuania?
Okay, so the RRF measure, it's still under development, so we are still tinkling with it, trying to figure out, how exactly that scheme will look like, and what will be supported, and the prioritization of the different areas, where exactly we're gonna, turn these, funnel these funds. But in short, it will support the revetting of the drained and damaged peatlands specifically on the areas that are classified now as agricultural for agricultural land use. So we have this kind of a separation between the activities planned by the Ministry of Environment, where they are looking towards more the protected areas, the Natura sites and other similar locations, whereas our measure is, as I said, is more towards the agricultural lands. And now talking about the cap, as all the European countries are really now currently in the process of developing the new strategic plans with a deadline for the new year. We are kind of basically, because we do have this RRF measure, it is the one that will be used to support the restoration of wetlands, whereas the money and the schemes under the strategic plan will be more about the maintaining of the existing areas and especially when it comes to maybe not the areas that are now under crops or something like that, but that are under grasslands and their maintenance. So there has to be the separation, because otherwise we can't really fund the same things through the different sources of the EU funds. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe just for the ones who are not so much into EU peatland policy or EU policy in general, the RRF is the Recover and Resilience Fund of the European Union. So this is the recovery fund from the European Union for green recovery after the corona pandemic. So just to make that clear to everyone. And I would like to ask Neil to have the next question here.
Thank you very much, Jan. Just to say that I'm from the National University of Ireland, and basically in our parliament recently there was a big discussion about Latvian peat, believe it or not. I don't know if you heard about this, but what actually happened is about 20% of our land is actually peatland area. So, I mean, we have a huge amount of peat in Ireland. But recently the government decided to just stop extraction completely. So then it became a big cause célèbre because it was found that Latvian peat is now being imported into Ireland, which is absolutely nonsensical because we have a lot of peat. We're using peat for horticulture, obviously. But, is there anything to stop? My question really is there anything to stop Latvian peat coming into Ireland? Because most sensible people don't want Latvian peat. Sorry for saying that. It's lovely peat. But, we don't actually want it to come to Ireland for horticulture. We'd like you to keep it in Latvia, keep it as restored wetland. But I have a feeling also countries like Germany and countries like the UK who've stopped things, there may be pressure on from the horticulture industry to export peat from all of your countries for the use in horticulture. I mean, is there any way we can help, or is there any measure that you could put in place to sort of stop that flow somewhat?
Maybe Kristi, you can also answer to that.
Well, I think, not from the Ministry of Environment perspective, we cannot kind of unilaterally put any kinds of measures like that. I think if there was a measure, I think that would then require some kind of that should be an EU measure then, or a global measure, because in the spirit of also I would say free competition, you cannot just exclude one sector without any kind of because then of course we would be also in a situation where the competition is not really fair among the European countries. But I understand that is an issue, and of course I understand the problem there. I do have to note that also a large part of the kind of also money from the peat that's being exported comes also back to Latvian budget. So that's also another challenge to consider. But unfortunately, that's my limits. There are limits to what I can really answer. So thank you.
Maybe Kristi, as there were also in the chat, I had also some questions about how is it possible to achieve climate neutrality or carbon neutrality till 2050 if till then also peat extraction goes on. Maybe you can also elaborate a little bit more on this question, and also this interlinkages in the European markets.
Very good questions indeed. What I would say is that when developing policies in order to reduce GHG emissions, there also the knowledge has to grow what kind of impact actually the peat mining areas have on climate policy and also on biodiversity. And I think there is a slight difference between the societies in Europe, and also in terms of knowledge, what kind of policies need to be put in place in order to achieve climate policy targets. And I would say that I'm sure that in Ireland also that proves that when you have made this decision politically, shows that the demand also from public is growing. So the politicians are ready to make decisions which might not be that popular. And also I strongly believe that in all European countries in the coming years the same developments will take place. And also when we evaluate what kind of investments do we need to have in order to achieve climate policies, then once we have analyzed all the let's say cost effectiveness of different investments, then certainly I would say peatlands is one of those which comes, I believe, very actively on the agenda in the coming years, because it's very effective from that perspective. So I agree that in order to achieve climate neutrality by 2050, there needs to be a clear decision on that, and I believe we are moving towards that direction also from the perspective of peatlands.
Thank you. There's also one very interesting comment here in the Q&A that actually not only the production side is important, but also the demand side, that of course big supermarkets, retail chains, they are really pushing down the prices for vegetables all over the EU. And we calculated that adding just a few cents per salad, per tomato or whatever on the price in the supermarket could already give like a strong incentive to use more sustainable substrates in horticulture and to move away from the fossil peat substrates. But on the other hand, and this is maybe then connecting to this question, of course, it's also like an quite a big economic factor in the Baltic countries, the peat industry. And this, of course, has to transform, like the car industry in Germany, for example, has to transform. So what do you think, maybe to Elina first, what do you think the Baltic countries would need as a support or as a technical and financial support to transform this this business and this sector?
Well, to me, I think the one question the at least the industry representatives is asking me constantly is about the alternatives. What are the alternatives to the peat substrates for horticulture, and how viable they really are in the country? Because frankly, I don't have that response, and I know there is probably a good response to this, but it's not widely known. So I think kind of raising awareness on this factor is also essential. And I think we will be most likely given extra funds from the European Union from the Just Transition Mechanism on also the kind of modernizing peat industry. But of course these funds would not cover the need, but at least there is kind of some positive development also in that direction. But I think we will seek to answer many of these questions in the report I mentioned in my presentation on the whole land use change and forestry sector, because we will need to answer these questions and provide a viable strategy to really reach the 2030 targets as well as 2050 goal of climate neutrality, to be on that right trajectory. So we hope to really answer also many of those questions in that document that we will prepare for the government. So that's my answer for now.
Thank you. Yeah, Kristi, maybe adding to that?
Yeah, maybe one idea which would be also interesting to hear is that there is a growing demand from private sector in Estonia who are interested in offsetting the CO2. And I know that this is one of the topics also here in COP negotiations, of course. But now we can see that the companies who truly want to become climate neutral are seeking projects where they could invest to in order to offset their CO2, which cannot be just simply reduced. And there, what is most attractive actually to those companies are the projects which are investing in biodiversity, in restoring peatlands, etc. Because it's also, let's say, it's attractive for the, let's say, the appearance of the company. And there, I would also see a great impact thriving from the private sector if they demand more projects like this, and it helps the government or the public sector to enhance the investments into those projects. Then it can be a very attractive stream of investments.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this is a very relevant point. Last week, we had a lot of sessions here also addressing the finance point of view, also how to involve businesses, how to involve private sector in funding peatland restoration projects, paludiculture. I mean, it's kind of, or could be also kind of private carbon farming schemes which have to be involved. Yeah, all of us, I mean, many of in this room are already working on that. And we are also pleased to collaborate with the Baltic countries to work on that. And one point which I found very important from you, Elina, is mentioning this Just Transition Fund or Just Transition in general, because I think it's still quite poorly understood that peat is actually a fossil resource. It's like fossil as coal or lignite or oil and gas. And if we want to support the transformation of which like only very few people, we have seen like only 5-6% of the land is actually under agriculture is actually peat. So only these farmers are affected very strongly. They have to shift. This is not an effort which they can take alone, but they have to be supported. They have to get incentives. They have to be financed for making this change. And they also need some guarantees that in 10, 20 years, people won't ask them again to drain, for example, as it is clear from the science that we need to re-wet much larger areas. And then maybe one question also to you, Jeva. There was a question here in the chat, if you are also looking on the effect of afforestation on peatlands, as the examples here from Scotland, which sees a lot of these actions, reforestation of degraded peatlands under drainage in the Scottish Highlands mostly, that they actually saw after measures that this had a net negative effect for the climate. How do you see that, and are you also approaching that in the project?
Yes, afforestation is for sure one of our main measures we are considering, and afforestation of organic soils could work even better than just afforestation of mineral soil, because we are taking off emissions from sector of agriculture and converting this land to forestry land. And we are then generating CO2 removals by forest stand to be grown there. And it's indeed one of our main measures also considered in our policy documents currently in rules of action plan, land use change, forestry sector action plan. It's one of main measures, and we also are, we have started discussion nationally about carbon farming as well. We are discussing right now also which measures could be included there, and afforestation comes in the first row also to be considered. Everything is not very clear right now. We are just in the beginning of discussions, of course, and in beginning of research in this field, but afforestation of organic soils could be a very powerful measure indeed. And it also is part of, at least I have seen in our Common Agricultural Policy Strategic Plan, a draft version, that organic soil afforestation is mentioned also there. So also from policy perspective, it's understood that it's worth to invest there, and it's where we should go, in fact, also. At least quite a powerful measure to discuss.
Yeah, actually, what I wanted to say, or what the comment was here, that in Scotland it actually proved as counterproductive, that actually more carbon was released in the total balance from the soils than sequestered in the forest. But I understand also from what you said that it's of course, yeah, very different from which climatic zone you're talking, and also if these are nutrient-rich or nutrient-poor organic sites. So there's still some gaps, but also we have broad knowledge that we have to be very careful with afforestation on organic soils as well. I have one very last question here from the audience, and then I will wrap up. So please keep it short.
Okay, thank you. My name is Jenny Hawley. I'm from Plant Life International, which is an NGO campaigning for an end to the use and the extraction of peat for horticulture. And we work for wild plants and fungi, so particularly interested in biodiversity. Just on this point, I just wanted to highlight there's a report here about peat-free horticulture, which you might have mentioned earlier. I'm sorry I missed the beginning of the session. But also, the horticultural industry in the UK is developing a labelling scheme for bags for consumers, which rates all of the materials, so peat and other materials, in terms of their sustainability. So that might be something that is useful in other countries as well. And just finally, on the point about peat and trees, we found recently in the UK that peat is being extracted and then used in the production of tree saplings in tree nurseries, which are then planted, to absorb carbon and improve biodiversity, which just seems completely crazy. So I think, it's not just about horticulture and peat, but also arboriculture and peat, and we need to be very careful to make sure that the tree planting agenda is not based on extracted peat. Thank you.
Thank you. So this was more a comment than a question, which is good for me because we only have 5 minutes left, and I would like to wrap up. I would like to thank all of you here present in the pavilion, online, at your screens, to following us, to putting the question. And of course, I would especially thank our speakers here, Yeva online, and the three of you physically here in the pavilion. I think we got a very, very good overview what is happening in the Baltic countries, what are the challenges, what are also opportunities which you can use in the future, and that there is a way forward, but we have to act fast. We know that peatlands are super nature-based solutions, not only for the climate, but also, as we have really nicely seen, especially in Kristi's presentation, for unique species, because these peatland species, they are so well adapted to these kind of ecosystems that they cannot grow anywhere else. So we need the peatlands also for biodiversity, but also this was here in the chat, we haven't discussed that, also for water buffering and water purification, which is one very important ecosystem service of peatlands. So there's a wide range of policy objectives which can be reached by wise use and sustainable management of peatlands on organic soils. And this always means that we have to raise the water levels in the sites to lower the carbon emissions. And for this, of course, this brings challenges to the land users. This brings challenges to the whole value chains nowadays connected to peatlands. So if we want to upscale, as you have mentioned, we need to invest not only on the agricultural side, but also on the side of processing the biomass, on the marketing, on bringing it to the market, to build awareness, to make it more clear what it is. But also one point, I think it came from, I don't know who mentioned that actually we also need capacity on the side of technical implementation of these measures, because we have large scale restoration ahead of us, large scale change of water management systems. Also, for example, in Germany, we are facing that. So we need millions and billions of euros probably to make this change. And as climate change is a societal objective and a challenge which we all share, not only the little farmer who is sitting in his drained peatlands, which is already now the kind of marginal land, that he has to cover the cost on his own. But we as a society, and especially politics, has to invest there, has to build up support schemes, which of course, and this was also a question here in the chat, which we haven't addressed, which of course need very robust monitoring and evaluation MRV schemes, so that carbon farming is not another way of greenwashing from compensating emissions from elsewhere, but it has to be robust, and it needs to be applicable also for the farmer without becoming not a carbon farmer, but just a paper tiger who is just filling forms the whole day. So we have to find ways to make that possible and to take the farmers along, to advise them, to incentivize them. And also there should be, of course, also from the demand side, so from the whole society, not only from the Baltic countries, but also from other European countries, much more emphasis of having carbon neutral or even carbon negative products from Paludiculture, as this is possible on the markets, so that we all can contribute to good policies, which are the basics to set a good framework to make that happen. And with these words, I would like to thank all of you again. Thanks for listening and being active. I was really pleased that we had this half hour of active interaction, and we also have some snacks, tea and coffee in the back. So if you would like, just stay with us some more minutes. We can get in touch and discuss some issues further, which is not an option for you in the internet on the screens, but I hope that you will also find some time to grab a coffee and a piece of cake at home or in your offices. And I would like to thank you again and have a great day. Thank you. And join us again at the Peatland Pavilion.